COIN, Community-Oriented Integration Network, is a network of friends, people of experience, who explore how to develop local communities for health, compassionate communities. So what we're going to be doing tonight is hearing from Gerry Gorman from America. She's going to introduce herself in a moment. And about transformative and particularly restorative justice, which is her field. Now, Gerry's spoken before. We have a video of that already available. It's timely now because we've produced two papers that have drawn quite a considerable attention from people in senior places, discussing it more further in March the 27th meeting, when we will be discussing the implications for the 5 or 6 different initiatives that we're aligned to that are moving this kind of thinking forward.
I'm a geriatric neurologist, primary care wannabe, environmental ethicist who focuses on brain health, mental health, and climate change. And
hello, Gerry. David Consomme, retired general practitioner in the UK, and formerly did work for some years at the government level as well.
Not yet. David Peters, hi, former family doctor, emeritus professor of integrated healthcare, and I edit a journal called Journal of Holistic Health.
Sorry, I'm Tony. I'm another retired GP in Northwest London, and a champion for older people and age-friendly communities, amongst other things.
But Danish PhD student and GP to be.
Sorry about that, yeah. Linda Lang, we did talk earlier, and I'm delighted that you're going to be speaking, Gerry. Formerly, I was a dean of a faculty of education, health and wellbeing, but I've been in several different universities in the UK and also worked in the United States in clinical research. So a bit of a mixed bag of things, and like others, there's lots of other stuff to talk about. But
from Gerry later on, Lucy Kvapchevich. I'm working for British Society of Gastroenterology at the moment, but previously started my journey at Royal College of General Practitioners, where my paths cross with Paul and various members of COIN, and I've not left, so I've been supporting the group ever since, and took it, further.
On the go. My name is Christy Blythen. I have come from New Zealand, been in the UK for a couple of years now. I'm a registered pharmacist, but currently working at the RCGP within the policy team, having worked in the workforce policy and now moving over towards the community and integrated care side of things.
Thank you. It's really nice to be back with this group again. I'm a clinical professor in the College of Nursing at the University of Illinois, Chicago. I've been there for about 22 years. I'm in the department, used to be called the Department of Public Health, which is basically what we do, but then we now call ourselves the Department of Health System Sciences, primarily teaching and writing. I also practice as a hospice nurse in community. So I have had that. I've been doing that for just about the same amount of time, for about 22, 23 years now. Nursing was actually a third career for me. I started off as an English literature student with the intention of going on, getting a doctorate in teaching. I did that until I actually had to teach the writing of a research paper, and then that convinced me that was not what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. So I terminated with a master's degree. I went into social services, direct social services in Chicago, working primarily with low-income elderly. And I did that for about 10 years, again in community, before I turned to nursing. As I was preparing this version of this presentation, I was keenly aware of being an American nurse, educator, and citizen in the early months of a very tumultuous 2025. My interest has been and remains in restorative justice for reasons that I will explain. Transformative justice is certainly well embedded in the social justice vernacular, and it's often used synonymously with restorative justice. So I'll start by offering what seems to me to be the philosophical differences between them, as nuanced as they might be. Certainly, they have much more in common than that which divides them. I should add that my bias, I wouldn't say I have a strong bias against transformative justice, but whatever resistance I feel about the terminology and its evolution has a lot to do with teaching. The students that I work with have wonderful qualities that will make them exceptional nurses, but there can be a kind of relentless tendency among some, certainly not all, but among some, toward linguistic political correctness. The distinction between transformative and restorative justice often strikes me as that kind of rhetorical arm wrestling. Next. Transformative justice is certainly the newer iteration of an attempt to reform our justice system. It arose primarily from the abolitionist movement that formed in the late 90s and the early 2000s. And those of us who have spent time in American jails and prisons, and I'm sure it is to a certain extent true worldwide, know that our system of detainment and incarceration is broken, racist, classist, and dehumanizing. But we also know, here in the United States, with almost 2 million people incarcerated, we cannot wait for the revolution to support and witness. Restorative justice recognizes this and extends its practices to meet people wherever they are within the cycle, from building healthier and more cohesive communities to those languishing in detainment or returning from it, in a way that transformative justice does not quite transverse that spectrum. What restorative justice also offers that transformative justice is a little thinner on is time-tested traditions and extensive scholarship over decades. Its origins are deeply embedded in indigenous communities across the world. And it is always based on community involvement. The heart of restorative justice recognizes that in order to repair what has been broken or integrity that has been impaired, the community is required. In addition, restorative justice also kind of embraces and weaves within it the major philosophical, spiritual, and religious traditions, from Judaism to Christianity, certainly compatible with Buddhism, Hinduism, and other Eastern philosophies. And so there is a kind of recognition that there are certain kind of time-tested truths to which we all at least aspire, and that is that it's a good idea, whenever possible, to try to forgive one another, and also that we would like to be treated in the same way that we would aspire, or we would like to treat other people in the same way we would aspire to be treated. Again, it also has a pretty robust body of literature that supports it, from John Braithwaite, who is an Australian restorative justice scholar, who really emphasizes the applicability of restorative justice across many different spectrums of society. It is helpful whenever domination or abuse of power occurs, whether that be in crime, in war, or in school bullying. Whenever there is domination, whenever there is abuse of power, there should be a justice system that offers healing and integrity. Howard Zehr is an American-born criminologist, also well established within the restorative justice literature. And this quote from Zehr I like, because he really emphasizes the idea that if practiced according to its essence, restorative justice really becomes a way of being, kind of a habit of being in the world. And that has been certainly borne out by the restorative justice practitioners that I have known. It is not just their work, but it is also the way they move through life. Again, at its heart, restorative justice recognizes the integral role of community. That whenever harm has been done, in addition to addressing it between the person who has enacted the harm and the person who has been harmed, it really requires the support of the community around it to repair the harm and restore the integrity of the community. It recognizes the absolute essential nature of fostering relationships within community and between the people who live in community. My community in Chicago is particularly rich in restorative justice practices. We have 8 different hubs in different parts of the city that offer restorative justice practices and education, and kind of target different demographics, different age groups. Most of the restorative justice hubs do tend to be in under-resourced neighborhoods and neighborhoods that are high in rates of incarceration. Of those, the largest and the oldest is on the southwest side of Chicago, and it is called Precious Blood Ministry of Reconciliation. And it works within a community that is very, very under-resourced, has an extremely high rate of incarceration, of homicide, and the demographics tend to be primarily Black and Hispanic. The woman you see down there in the left-hand corner is Donna Liete, who is was established by the religious order of the Precious Blood, and Donna is a nun within that order. She had worked with women returning from prison prior to coming to Chicago, and since being with Precious Blood in Chicago for the last 12 years, she has led the Mothers program, which works with women who have lost children to violence, either the violence of the streets or the violence of incarceration. But one of the primary tenets of restorative justice is hospitality and meeting people where they are, and proximity. So all the people who work within the organization live in the community with where they work. There is a center that is open pretty much 24 hours a day, offering hospitality to those who need a refuge from the streets, from the violence. And then there is a real effort to beautify the area and to offer an antidote to the urban blight, which so often characterizes these under-resourced communities. So you see there the gardens, the flower gardens that Donna tends, and there is also an ever-expanding urban garden there where they grow fruits and vegetables during the short growing season in Chicago. And that is open to all of the community members to come in and work together, and also to take from the garden whatever it is that they need. Whatever I have learned about the practice of restorative justice, I've really learned through the generosity and the kindness of the community of Precious Blood. I've undergone the restorative justice circle training twice, both times through the auspices of Precious Blood, and I have attended many of their circles with different aspects of the community. Also, rather unique in Chicago, not only in Chicago, but we are very fortunate to have restorative justice programs embedded in many of our public schools. Excuse me. Since 2014, we have started 34 programs in elementary schools across the city, and I believe it's 26 high schools now offer programs in restorative justice. And they focus not only on conflict resolution, that's part of it, but also on community building. So the idea is much more preventative. You know, how do we teach children at an early age how to value strong community and how to work together? I would imagine most of you have had some experience with these kinds of circles, whether they're called feminist circles or peace circles or restorative justice circles. They certainly have been implemented in many different fashions. But the sort of classic restorative justice circle has in its center there what is called either the centerpiece or the altarpiece, depending on the group involved. And very important to the practice of the circle, whether it is conflict or community building, is the idea that all of the members of the circle agree upon the values that they want to honor. And so those pieces of paper you can see in the middle there are the values that each member contributes that they would like to have upheld, and then all of the members of the circle have to agree. And again, the sort of ritual and traditions of the restorative justice circles all harken back to the indigenous roots. And very central to that is the talking piece, which levels the playing field, as does the circle formation itself. Just a reminder that there is no hierarchy, no organizational framework, no chain of command, but sitting in circle, all are equal, and the person who holds the talking piece has the undivided attention of the circle. While they hold the piece, all listen with focus and intentionality to the one who is speaking. And this is an example of one of the mother circles. So within these circles, as hopefully you'll be able to hear, women come who are drawn by a shared sense of loss, whether that is the loss of a child to death through the violence in the neighborhood, or the loss of a child to incarceration. And sometimes mothers have the experience of both. So.
Hey, hello everybody. It's wonderful. We have a little circle, sort of, but actually much bigger than I expected with the snow out there, so I didn't expect many people to come at all, many mothers, women, so it's good. So let's just take a moment to kind of concentrate on our candle and just the presence of God. One of the primary things that we do is to work with youth, boys 14 to 24, and try to prevent violence and gang life. And so I would go into the juvenile detention center, and as I would talk to the boys, they'd say, "Will you call my mother?" So I started calling the mothers. So we meet once a month, and we gather and we have a real nice brunch for them, because no one really honors these women whose children are incarcerated, because they think they're bad mothers, and also the mothers sometimes isolate because they feel shame, they feel fear.
I went to the Mother Circle because in 2011, I lost my one and only son, Anthony L. Brown Jr., to gun violence. I did not know the dynamics of the Mother Circle. In the circle, you know, you kind of like sharing your stories. You go around one by one holding a talking piece and you're telling your stories. And so as we're going around, I'm listening to all these moms' stories. And then I'm thinking to myself, I'm in the wrong circle, because I'm hearing stories of mothers who have children that are incarcerated for actually murdering somebody.
I'm not one that has lost any of my children through violence, but I had a daughter that was a perpetrator of violence. So one of my biggest fears when I would get those 2 or 3 o'clock morning calls was that she either got killed or killed somebody.
We all have the same issues, but we may have a different story on how we got there. In that circle, I think we all was able to help each other to get to a place of healing, because at the end of the day, we all had a loss. And that's what I had discovered from that circle. And I think many of those other women had discovered as well.
Why I come is just to provide a space and just to be with women who have such powerful stories, such rich souls. You're rich in your soul. Your stories really need to be told and beyond. Those of you who have lost children to violence, you have lost children to incarceration, you're very, very special women. You're good women, and you're hurting women. And we have a challenge as a community to help you through that.
From a public health standpoint, restorative justice has applications across all 3 levels of prevention. From primary prevention, which I talked about a little bit, you know, establishing the programs in primary schools and in high schools to give kids a foundation in both community building, the importance of strong communities, and also in conflict resolution methodology that is not punitive, but that is based on listening and understanding. Secondary levels, we certainly have restorative justice programs within jails and prisons. There are groups who go in and run circles for those who are already in the criminal justice system. One of the projects that I had always hoped to undertake and thus far have not been able to was to work with the correctional staff within the institutions, because when you spend time in jails or prisons, you understand very quickly that everybody who enters those institutions feels the impact of the environment and of the confinement and the restrictions. And so involving the staff in the programs, we've done it with some limited success in the juvenile detention center in Chicago, but we haven't been quite so successful with working with correctional officers in the state prisons and county jails. And then tertiary prevention, restorative justice is very much involved in reentry programs. So once people come back to the community from whatever it might have been, whether it's incarceration or homelessness, mental health, behavioral health issues, whatever it might be that took them out of the community, restorative justice practice welcomes them back and helps them reintegrate. And in addition to just the circles, restorative justice hubs also offer wraparound programs like help with tutoring, with GED programs, with employment, all of those very basic necessities of life and of the social determinants of health that contribute to healthy communities. We have had, while it's been very successful, restorative justice program, well, not very successful, relatively successful at an elementary and high school level, we haven't seen the same fostering of this approach at higher levels of education. So there were a group of us at the University of Illinois, Chicago, where I teach, who tried to launch a restorative justice program a few years ago. We are fortunate to have in our law school a law professor named Michael Seng, who has been very involved in the restorative justice movement from a legal sense for many years. And he teaches a course in the law school on restorative justice. So he and I and the dean of the health science library worked for about a year to try to bring together interested people across the community, across the university, the academic community, to integrate restorative justice practices into the university. We had some successes, but that also kind of got lost in the extensive political weeds that can dictate community academic funding. And now, of course, in this particular climate, it's pretty far down on the totem pole in terms of priorities. But within the College of Nursing, I have used restorative justice practices quite successfully with my own students. We have used it as a way to structure clinical discussions, post-clinical discussions. We have used it as a way to consider alternatives to our students as part of their community health rotation go into Cook County Jail. And we have talked about how nursing and how healthcare in general can foster restorative practices that can help to support those who are incarcerated. And most recently, last fall, our graduating nursing students participate in a course. It's their last semester before graduation, and it's a clinically based course that is supposed to give them some experience in working in quality improvement within large healthcare systems. Usually we end up just sending them into hospitals and putting them on a unit, and they do some sort of quality improvement project. And I don't want to denigrate the importance of that, but it's been pretty narrow in our approach. So this year, I offered the opportunity to a group of students to work within the community instead. And we developed a collaboration between the College of Nursing and the School of Law, where Michael Singh teaches his course. So our students went to some of the courses that he teaches on restorative justice practices and collaborated with the law students in communities. And they went specifically to boys and girls clubs within the community. So our collaboration entailed going into two different neighborhoods. The Pilsen neighborhood, which is on the southwest side of Chicago, which is 70% Hispanic, and a neighborhood that is both very, very rich in cultural heritage, but also experiences a very high incarceration rate. And of course, now with the crackdown on immigration, there is even more concern and fear in that community, which is home to many undocumented families. So we had in the Pilsen Boys and Girls Club, they were working with children, elementary age children, all of them bilingual to a certain extent, but primarily Spanish speaking. And all of our students who went in were also Spanish speaking students who were from that area, or at least shared the same cultural background. And then the second neighborhood that we went into is Humboldt Park, which is on the west side of Chicago. You can see the demographic breakdown there. Also a very under-resourced area, one that is very high in both crime statistics and in the rates of incarceration. And in that case, we also had students similarly representative. They worked with adolescents. So they went in to these communities, taught them the basics of restorative justice, ran circles with them, not focusing so much on conflict resolution because these students were just kind of getting their feet wet in restorative justice practices, but certainly on community building. And it was, again, it was our pilot program, but it was extremely successful, and we're in the process of writing a paper on it now. So a few other examples, local examples of successful restorative justice community applications. Rush University, which is right down the street from our University of Illinois campus, and probably our major competitor, but a private university, so they have more funding than we do. They established through their College of Medicine a program on restorative justice, and I'll quote from their description. They say that their program offers the basics and the practice of restorative justice, which works to build empathy, enable healing, and strengthen communities as they strive towards a just society in which all lives have equal value. They hold regular community building circles, which provide an opportunity once a month to come together as a community and connect with one another, reflect, and provide an outlet for discussion in a safe environment. Again, you know, who knows the future of these programs, but as a private university, they probably are a little bit better positioned to continue than some of us. The University of Chicago on the south side of Chicago opened up its trauma unit, and I believe it was 2017. There was a lot of community pressure to have a level 1 trauma center on the south side because there were not any, and the University of Chicago's Medical Center complied, opened a trauma center, and with that they established a series of restorative programs that offered wraparound services for the victims of violence within the community. And then more recently, under the auspices of our still relatively new mayor, Brandon Johnson in Chicago, he continued the services around violence interruption in Chicago neighborhoods and expanded them. And the director that he brought in to oversee those programs is a trained restorative justice practitioner. So those are just a few examples of local initiatives in Chicago that are community-based restorative programs. There's also, and I concentrated on this a little bit more in my previous presentation, but restorative justice, its practices are also, well connected and intersect with the truth and justice hearings and practices that we have seen internationally in South Africa and other countries, and also in Ireland, in Northern Ireland, following the peace accords, there was a concerted effort to bring restorative justice practices into their certainly into their schools, but into their communities as well. And last fall, we were very pleased to welcome two of the restorative justice practitioners from Belfast who work with the Youth Justice Agency in Belfast, and they came and presented at our university and talked about the success of their programs. So there is a strong argument for restorative justice philosophy and practice on almost any level of intervention or any setting as an antidote to moral distress, which is so prevalent these days, certainly in healthcare, but prevalent in many different segments of society. And moral distress is sometimes also given the short-term or shorthand definition of burnout. I've always thought burnout was inadequate to describe what happens to people who try to do a job that they love and believe in, but are constrained by external circumstances and cannot act on the values and beliefs or practice in the way that they want to practice. And we have certainly seen that become an increasing problem, not just since COVID, but COVID really brought it to the light. We know that we're more susceptible to this sort of distress when we're isolated. And as we know from our former US Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy, who brought to our attention that we are currently suffering from an epidemic of isolation and loneliness. Restorative justice breaks through that kind of separation as it demands community engagement, not virtually, but real engagement between real people in real time. So that seems particularly pertinent in this time of international political fragmentation. How do we find restoration and resolution? We find it partly through the power of the story. Restorative justice is really based on the belief in the individual story and the power of understanding that comes from it. When we truly listen to one another quietly and with the intention of understanding, we help to restore what has been fragmented. If we do not make the space to do this, we lay the foundation for stereotyping, for pigeonholing, and for demonizing one another, as this poem suggests. This is actually a poem that was written in 2002, so following 9/11, but certainly has reverberations for what we're seeing today. It's by Harriet Mullen. We are not responsible. We are not responsible for your lost or stolen relatives. We cannot guarantee your safety if you disobey instructions. We do not endorse the causes or claims of people begging for handouts. We reserve the right to refuse service to anyone. Your ticket does not guarantee that we will honor your reservation. In order to facilitate our procedure, please limit your carrying on. Before taking off, please extinguish all smoldering resentments. If you cannot understand English, you will be moved out of the way. In the event of a loss, you better look out for yourself. Your insurance was canceled because we can no longer handle your frightful claims. Our handlers lost your luggage and we are unable to find the key to your legal case. You were detained for interrogation because you fit the profile. You are not presumed to be innocent if the police have reason to suspect you are carrying a concealed wallet. It's not our fault you were born wearing a gang color. It is not our obligation to inform you of your rights. Step aside, please, while our officers inspect your bad attitude. You have no rights we are bound to respect. Please remain calm, or we can't be held responsible. Restorative justice practices, with its long roots and traditions and affiliation with the moral codes across cultures and faith traditions, call us to a higher standard of care for one another. Like a labyrinth, restorative justice invites us on a circular pathway that brings us back to a place of origin and integrity. In accordance with the COIN objectives, I suggest that restorative justice offers the following opportunities for community enhancement. Opportunities for learning. We learn when we listen, and listening is at the heart of restorative justice practice. Understanding. The more we know of a person's story, the more we understand the context of their lives. As for positive actions, restorative justice involves the community. The community works towards healing rifts, fissures, and restoring balance. And what these practices would help us to avoid, they reject linear thinking and practices that posit wisdom as a top-down proposition and the province of authority. They circumvent blame in favor of personal accountability and community responsibility. Conflicts become an impetus for learning and evolution rather than condemnation and punishment. And finally, restorative justice practices demand our undivided attention. Our focus is on the speaker sharing experiences, and when we listen without distraction, we hear the unmistakable echoes of our commonality.
I really enjoyed your explanation of restorative justice. I just wondered, thinking more around the sorts of things we've been talking about in COIN, one of the things that we've been looking at is developing the practitioners of the future, and talked about introducing things like enabling people to become facilitators, to develop understanding of how to work with communities. And it strikes me that restorative practice, and I'd kind of prefer to call it that in my own head, is a really good way of working with practitioners, as you are in your course that you're delivering in the University of Illinois. I just wondered what impact you've noticed it having on those practitioners you've been working with. How has it changed them? What sort of feedback have you had, and what have you observed? If you could just give me.
Most of the restorative justice practitioners that I have worked with have been community-based social service people, or they've been in law. And certainly the term restorative justice comes out of, a kind of a legal application. So I think that the, this area of how we can fit this into healthcare practice is wide open. But within this sort of larger umbrella of violence interruption in the communities, restorative justice practitioners have had a presence in emergency rooms and worked with the personnel in emergency rooms to try to provide a lot of creative applications that we're just beginning to explore.
It's genuinely inspiring, and I think the issues addressed in restorative justice. By the way, I learned it in Chicago also from Kristen Bodeford and Bliss Brown and some people you probably know. Are so generalizable to our cultural malaise as well, in general, not just in healthcare, which we've been talking about here, but this notion of focusing on regeneration, restoration, resilience. The R prefix is really in, community is in, process is in, relationships are in. So I was in your talk, but after hearing this from you the second time, I thought to myself, why isn't this easier to bring into this larger cultural zeitgeist? So what is it? What are the powers in your mind that are resisting this kind of transformation, which you've been working on for so long?
So yeah, a big thank you, Gerry. Your words were very moving, I think, particularly in this political context as well. But one thing that struck me was in Aotearoa, New Zealand, we have essentially what's called ACC, or it's our no fault public insurance within healthcare, and it has a very different approach in terms of redress. And I wonder if the previous question about maybe barriers in terms of larger systems that kind of reinforce ways of working, do you see systems such as what's happening in New Zealand through a different approach to complaints and patient harm in a very different mindset, quite quality improvement orientated? And
A question, please, Gerry, about the two-way nature of forgiveness. And I'm wondering if you forgive somebody for doing a wrong to you, but that person denies they ever wronged you, right? How does that fit inside restorative justice? And people, I was speaking to some just last week, actually, who believes that it's okay for her to attack anyone she likes because she was so badly attacked when she was a child. And
our experience in healthcare, and it's not just in healthcare, I mean, it's in education too, across different systems, has been moving us more and more towards efficiency and productivity. And with that, we have less time to listen to one another, or to, you talked about context in the sort of objectives of COIN. And I think that we have very little sense of context within healthcare and within education, and those are really the two areas that I'm most familiar with. But we have become, in order to become more productive, we have been encouraged to move away from the qualitative to the quantitative. And so we're checking boxes, we're checking boxes, we're checking boxes, and we're not sitting down and conducting an in-depth history, to put it in healthcare terminology. And in education, we have, I mean, just one example that comes to mind is we don't even now interview our students in person. We do it over Zoom because we can do, we can do them faster, and we have a set of certain, and it's not even over Zoom. It is, they produce a video that we watch. So they have 5 minutes to present their story over Zoom with no ability to interact. And I work in hospice, and so we are kind of a protected area. We still do have the luxury of time thus far. And productivity is not a big part of our practice. However, it is harder and harder within the electronic medical record to find a patient's story, because it is all reduced and fragmented now to checklists and to systems and to, so I think this and this move towards efficiency and productivity and speed and the value of the quantitative versus the qualitative, I think really impacts, the funding that we see too for the arts and humanities. I mean, science kind of prevails because science stresses objectivity and is easier to quantify. And I think that has ramifications across society. And then I'm not familiar. I'm sorry with what you mentioned about New Zealand. I wish I was more. I had a better understanding. I just off the top of my head, I can say that here in the United States, we always have looked towards New Zealand as being kind of a paragon of a much more humane approach to many different societal issues. So I'm sure that is true with health. In terms of what was mentioned about application, how this would apply across different segments of the community and different demographics, I think that you mentioned the elderly, and I think that what we are all susceptible to the risks of isolation and loneliness, but none more so than the elderly. And again, that was something which became much more visible and exacerbated during the period of COVID, where the number of people who were left to languish within these what became kind of warehouses became visible in a way that we hadn't seen it before. So the notion of the power of one's story and how we need to be able, that a strong community is based on the cohesion that comes from listening to one another. I think that has applications. And to your point, Paul, about what do you do with somebody who doesn't think that they've done something that merits forgiveness? I don't know that, you can do much with that, because part of the recognition for the restorative process is that people need to take accountability for their actions. And so if a harm has been done, in order for there to be restoration, there has to be recognition and accountability on the part of the person who committed the harm, with the support of the community around them. I find it particularly healing might be a little bit of a grandiose word to use, but I didn't realize how gratifying it would feel to speak to an international group, because we are so feeling so besieged right now in the United States, and we tend to keep saying the same things to each other over and over again. So knowing that there is a group like yours that continues to meet through these very difficult and volatile times, and to offer one another support and creative new initiatives that we can all work to support in our community is really, really helpful. And I will take this back to my community and hearten them as well. But I really do appreciate the chance to to speak with you today. And I'm really interested in what you're doing and find it very hopeful and inspiring.
But I wanted to just say something about the concept of neighborhoods and connect it back to what Gerry said. One of the interesting cross-cultural differences between the Americas and Great Britain and Europe is the influence of what we call indigenous thinking on some of the challenges we have. Gerry mentioned this in relationship to restorative justice. I would mention it in relationship to agriculture or even health. And I think we're rediscovering these roots, and in those roots are the importance of a sense of place. Neighborhoods are a good start. I would say, and I've said this in this group before, that thinking about the ecosystems of the neighborhoods exist in, and that gets you into the concept of bioregions, is also an important way of thinking about sense of place in relationship to geography and meteorology, for that matter. And often, whether it's a neighborhood or a bioregion or a tribe, it's the stories, it's the narrative elements that really define the community, not the geography.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you for that, Peter. Look, you could say, look, a community is a network of relationships. And if it gets called a neighborhood, it's a geographical location, which is not necessarily a neighborhood, a community whatsoever.